Henry the Green Engine has lived on the island of Sodor for many years. He wouldn't want to be anywhere else. He likes every part of it, from the fields filled with flowers to the white sandy beaches.
Heck yeah, has Henry been around for a while. He's been around the block more than several other engines. Ever since the end of Season 1, Henry hasn't been seen a whole lot. Sure, he did have dialogue here and there in Season 2, but that was it. Here, though, we are learning more things about Henry and his love for the environment that surrounds him. Sure, he's a steamy and all things mechanical, but he also enjoys the natural parts of life, especially his forest.
Henry loved it here. The forest was full of broad oaks and tall pines.
Wow, that's a welcoming rendition to Henry's theme. His first version from Season 1 will always be his, but this rendition has a great way of ending too. I like how the music is going so far. So what is it that made Henry enjoy the forest so much? For one, he loved to reminisce the time he and Toby helped bring in saplings. I don't know, maybe Henry took a recent liking to taking time away from the hustle and bustle of moving rolling stock. Of course, stopping and taking in the sights was something the Reverend W. Awdry was quite critical of in this episode, but more on that later.
Henry always felt better for being here. He couldn't really explain why, but his driver understood. "It's peaceful," he said to Henry. But one night, everything changed.
Okay, so we've seen the floodwaters rise in Sodor and the music for that kind of weather. However, this looks completely different. This looks almost like hurricane or gale winds. Adding to that was the sudden key change and tone in the musical score. It went from graceful to downright bleak. Not good. And look at the berth doors at Tidmouth Sheds. We've never seen them rattle like that. Thankfully for the engines, they were all snuggled up inside where they should be. Henry, however, was the only one concerned because he was afraid the weather would affect his forest.
"Listen," said Thomas. "Can you hear a strange whistling sound?" "It's the wind blowing outside our shed," replied Toby. "Do you know," added James, "if Gordon wasn't here now, I'd say it was him thundering by with the express." All the engines laughed, except Henry.
Well, unfortunately, Henry was right to be worried. When he returned to his local resting spot, things were not in good order. All the trees and shrubbery that he had so much appreciation for was no longer around. Jagged stumps and branches lay all over. This, of course, in no way left Henry with good feelings. The only thing left to do was to start clearing out the debris. For that, Donald went with the breakdown train to get started. Not much else could be done at that moment.
Trees lay everywhere. The hillside now looked so bare. Henry felt sad. "What will happen to all the animals who live here?" he thought.
Sadly, like anything that loses their home, they will be forced to relocate. I know, the situation is really dire right now. And that music is continuously driving home that notion, too. Right in the feels, man. The thing to do with all the broken trees now was bringing them to Toby and Thomas, who were at the timber mill. Though this was a good way of making use of all this scrap, Henry didn't feel much better. He wanted it like it used to be, where Terrence and Trevor were helping start over. Feeling uneasy about what to do, Toby happened to see Top Hat and expressed to him his concerns.
"Hello, Toby," said Sir Topham Hatt. "You do look glum." "I'm sad about the trees," said Toby. "And so is Henry. The forest is a special place to him." "We'll soon put that right," replied Sir Topham Hatt.
And people say Top Hat is a maniacal ruler over his engines. How can that claim even be made when he's willing to make things better and listens to the hardships of others? The evidence is there too, because shortly after that, Top Hat had Toby pick up some freight cars of fresh tree saplings for Henry's forest. And what a shock it was for Henry when he found out too. Although, I'm not sure why he thought this whole time nobody wasn't going to do anything about his forest massacre. "Yeah, let's just remove all the broken crap around the rails and leave everything empty. That's much better than doing anything to make it look nicer than before." Yeah, right. No sensible individual would think like that.
"We're beginning again. The hillside will look better than ever before. You'll see." Now, whenever Henry stops by the forest, he can see the new trees growing strong and tall. Sometimes everywhere is very quiet, and at other times Henry can hear leaves rustling or a bird's wing brushing the air. Often he can hear the distant sound of children laughing, and always he is happy here.
I'm going to come right out and say this is an amazing episode. One that hasn't been seen in a long time. Hands down. Henry gradually stole the show in Season 1 as his mechanical issues built up and then he finally made his rebound. But this little story about him was so heartfelt and beautiful, it's difficult not to find it emotional. First, as I mentioned before, Henry has been absent as of late. He has been in a few stories, but nothing that directly affected him in any major ways. Here, though, this was about something he felt connected to and how he felt after it was abruptly taken away. And for those keeping track of the types of narratives told within this season, we now have another story that has broken away from the typical Gordonism formula or another character confrontation type stories. Here, we get a solo arc for Henry and that's it. Done deal. Yes, the other engines are around and talk, but really their purpose is to show that they are all family and can get along as much as they are shown to disagree at times. It's also shown that they can come together as well to help out one another. Now, as for the Reverend W. Awdry's disagreement on the whole stopping to smell the whole roses business, his beef was that of not keeping the story realistic with Rule 55 of the railway, and that was alerting the signalman of a resting engine on the tracks. I respect Awdry a lot. After all, he did ignite the whole railway series and assisted in spawning this show. But I've already criticized the show for being questionable in its realism dealing with how engines can but can't move by themselves at the same time. That was a big problem in Season 2. This is hardly an episode to be angry over. In the end, the feeling of euphoria is overwhelmingly strong, one cannot help but smile. The hell with Rule 55 for this story, and kudos to Terrence and Trevor for assisting in rebuilding the forest and seeing them once again in this series. Hopefully we'll get to see more about them at some point. The sets and music were top-notch in this entry too. In this episode, we get to see Henry's forest in all its foliage, and it is by golly one of the most gorgeous places to see. Even after the storm blows through Sodor, the devastation left behind is remarkably well constructed. The stormy weather scenes are also well done, especially from the outside of Tidmouth Sheds. Mother Nature just looks nasty. We also revisit areas like the watermill and the country line rails. The lumber mill is a new spot, but who knows if we'll see that again. Now for the music, holy crap! That was the best we've ever heard in a while. O'Donnell and Campbell really outdid themselves this time. Henry's Season 3 theme rendition is pretty in its own way, and can be appreciated for how it was composed. The second stormy weather music theme is depressing, but in all the right ways. It really works in emphasizing the dread of what damage was being done. Lastly, Henry's forest theme was the best of them all. The piano-like keys drove home the more sensitive side of Henry and show how the forest made him feel. It is memorable in every way and by far a much stronger story than ones before it. Next episode is The Trouble with Mud. Thanks for watching.